So there I was sipping coffee on my porch, listening to my pigs do what pigs do, grunting, snorting, and living their best muddy lives when I heard sirens. At first, I thought maybe it was just another routine call, but then I saw her. Karen from 2 lots over was standing by my fence, her face red with indignation, yelling something about a noise violation. I couldn't believe my ears. Of all the animals on my farm, my pigs, my registered therapy animals, no less, were now the target of a full-blown police call. Before I could even process what was happening, Karen's shouts intensified. She wasn't just content with calling the cops. She stormed over to my property, scaling the fence as if she had something to prove. Her eyes blazed with self-righteous fury as she argued with the responding officers. "They're disturbing the peace," she insisted, her voice echoing off my farmhouse's walls. The scene was surreal. There I was, trying to enjoy my morning, while Karen's crusade unfolded in front of my eyes. Within minutes, the cops arrived, and the entire situation escalated into a chaotic spectacle. Neighbors peeked out of their windows and onto their porches, smartphones in hand, recording every moment. The officers attempted to calm the situation, explaining that therapy animals sometimes exhibit natural behavior, even loud grunts and playful snorts. But Karen, clinging to her rigid view of community decorum, refused to be swayed. Her actions, though intended to enforce order, instead sparked a reaction that no one saw coming. And then, in a twist that would soon break the internet, cameras caught Karen mid-fence climb with an enraged expression that could only be described as pure, unfiltered absurdity. Videos of the spectacle spread like wildfire on social media, turning her into an overnight viral sensation. Karen, who prided herself on being the bastion of proper conduct in our gated community, had just become the punchline of a joke heard around the world. This was more than a skirmish over noise levels. It was a showdown between outdated rules and the unyielding spirit of independent living. The stage was set for a battle of wills, a clash that would not only expose the overzealous nature of one HOA enforcer, but also galvanize the entire community into action. And so, with my pigs safely grazing in the background, I began to document the unfolding drama, one moment that would soon reshape what we all thought about the power of petty authority. Crescent Meadows was known as the epitome of suburban perfection. Neatly trimmed lawns, identical pastel houses, and sparkling clean driveways were everywhere. In this meticulously managed, gated community, every resident was expected to adhere to a strict set of rules enforced by the local homeowners association, HOA. The board's regulations were detailed and unyielding, down to the color of the flower boxes, and any deviation, however small, could land you in serious trouble. At the center of this ironclad system was Karen Miller, or HOA Karen, as she was universally known. In her early 50s, Karen was the self-appointed enforcer of Crescent Meadows standards. Dressed in crisp, conservative outfits with a clipboard always at the ready, she roamed the neighborhood with a hawk's eye for any sign of disorder. Her reputation for handing out fines for even the most minor infractions was well established. Whether it was a mismatched mailbox or a decorative element that didn't conform to her vision of perfection, Karen was quick to condemn it. In stark contrast, my farm, Green Acres, was my personal haven on the outskirts of Crescent Meadows. Unlike the cookie-cutter residences that dominated the neighborhood, my property was a sprawling mix of productive farmland and rustic charm. I'd inherited Green Acres from my family, and over the years, I had poured my soul into creating a space that celebrated both nature and independence. My farm stand, where I sold organic produce, homemade preserves, and even offered fresh eggs from our free-roaming chickens, was a vibrant expression of local entrepreneurship. It wasn't just a business, it was a way of life, a living testament to the joy of working the land and embracing individuality. A key part of my operation was my pig sanctuary. These weren't ordinary pigs. They were registered therapy animals, raised and trained to bring comfort and joy. Their natural behavior, full of grunts and playful snorts, added an endearing charm to my farm. Despite their sometimes boisterous nature, my pigs were a beloved fixture, drawing praise from visitors for their gentle demeanor and social nature. However, while most of my neighbors appreciated the authenticity of my lifestyle, Karen saw it as a disruption. Over the years, she had filed countless complaints against me, starting with a minor fine for an unauthorized expansion of my farm stand and culminating in her latest outrage over the noise from my pigs. To her, every sound, every bit of movement was a transgression against the perfect order of Crescent Meadows. The tension between me and Karen had been a silent undercurrent for quite some time. I believe in the beauty of individual expression and the freedom to run my farm as I saw fit. Karen, on the other hand, was determined to keep everyone in line, even if it meant calling in the cops over pigs grunting in the mud. Her obsession with controlling every nuance of our community often left residents fidgeting with a mix of amusement and fear, knowing that a single misstep could result in a hefty fine. The scene on that particular morning, pigs merrily going about their business, the sound of laughter and conversation mingling with the routine background noise of farm life, was about to be shattered by Karen's intolerance. When sirens pierced the calm and Karen's ire was unleashed, it set into motion a chain of events that would soon become the talk of the community and a viral sensation on the internet. The day began like any other, with the sun slowly rising over green acres and my pigs contentedly rooting around in their pen. I had just settled into my favorite rocking chair on the porch, enjoying a quiet moment, when the tranquility was shattered by the wail of sirens. At first, I thought nothing of it. Emergency services occasionally passed through, after all. But then, from the direction of the fence, I saw Karen Miller. With her trademark clipboard and an expression of righteous indignation, she was standing at the boundary of my property, pointing frantically at a spot on the fence, while barking in her phone about a noise violation. I could see her smirking as she yelled at passing cars, trying to draw attention to what she believed was a public nuisance. In her eyes, every sound my pigs made was an affront to the orderly serenity of Crescent Meadows. But what Karen didn't know was that my pigs weren't just any animals. They were registered therapy animals, a fact backed up by certificates posted in my office and praised by several community health groups. Their natural grunting and snorting were part of a living, breathing ecosystem of my farm, providing comfort to those who visited and even helping reduce stress in the local community. The police arrived, and the officers on the scene listened politely to Karen's complaint. They explained that therapy animals, by definition, could be a bit louder than typical livestock, and that sound was not a violation of any community guidelines. However, Karen, stubborn and unyielding, refused to accept this explanation. As the officers left, still shaking their heads in mild disbelief, I couldn't help but smile. I knew that this incident, while absurd on its face, was just the beginning of what would soon turn into a full-blown community spectacle. Later that day, my neighbor's social media posts and the live videos captured by several residents began circulating. Clips of Karen rampaging along my fence went viral within hours, with viewers laughing at her futile attempts to control the situation. The hashtag Pig Patrol became a trending topic locally, and countless residents commented that they finally understood the irony of someone so determined to preserve order while creating chaos. Fueled by digital support and my own simmering indignation, I decided to take a stand. I began compiling every piece of evidence: video clips of the sirens, screenshots of Karen's angry messages, and official documentation verifying the status of my therapy pigs. My digital dossier quickly amassed thousands of views and became the rallying cry for residents tired of arbitrary enforcement and petty vendettas. I also learned that Karen had escalated her campaign by trespassing onto my property later that evening, an act that was caught on my security camera. In one particularly damning clip, she was seen climbing over the fence, clipboard still in hand, as she muttered about setting a good example for the community. This invasive behavior wasn't just a violation of privacy. It was a breach of trust that would no longer be tolerated. Armed with undeniable proof of Karen's overreach, I contacted a local attorney specializing in property rights and community law. The lawyer confirmed that trespassing onto my private property was a serious offense, and she assured me that the digital evidence would serve as a powerful tool if the matter ever escalated legally. Simultaneously, community support continued to swell. Neighbors began organizing informal meetings and sharing their own stories of feeling marginalized by the HOA's capricious rules. Days passed, and the tension only grew. I received messages from residents urging me to take further action, some even suggesting that I get more creative with my countermeasures. The digital momentum was unmistakable. If one person dared to challenge the oppressive standards imposed by HOA Karen, then everyone would have the courage to stand up for their own rights. That sense of collective empowerment galvanized me to plan my next move, a strategy that would not only expose Karen further, but would also ensure that our community's voice was heard loud and clear. I decided that if Karen wanted to make a scene and call the cops on my pigs, then I would force her to face the consequences of her actions in a way that was both legal and unforgettable. I began drafting messages for the local social media groups, encouraging residents to document and share every instance of her overzealous behavior. I reached out to influential local bloggers who specialized in community news and property rights, and they quickly pledged their support. By the end of the day, it was clear that this was more than a personal dispute. It was a movement. The digital petition I started rapidly amassed thousands of signatures, and the viral videos of Karen's antics became the symbol of a much larger struggle for fairness and respect within Crescent Meadows. The stage was now set for a dramatic escalation that would force the HOA board to finally address the rampant abuse of power. In the following days, the uproar reached fever pitch. Social media exploded as more video clips of Karen's outbursts and trespassing incidents circulated widely. Hashtags such as hashtag #NoMoreKaren, hashtag PigPatrol, and hashtag property rights rallied residents who had long felt oppressed by the HOA's rigid enforcement of arbitrary rules. The collective voice of Crescent Meadows, once meek under the weight of bureaucratic overreach, was now a powerful force demanding change. Local news segments showcased interviews with baffled community members. "I always thought my pigs were just a bit noisy," one neighbor said, laughing, "but now I realize they're a symbol of our right to live freely." Reporters praised the absurdity of the situation and the boldness of my response, framing it as an act of creative rebellion against a system that prioritized conformity over common sense. Inside the HOA board, tension simmered behind closed doors. Emergency meetings were convened, and internally, board members were divided. Some staunchly defended Karen's actions, arguing that strict adherence to community norms was essential to maintain property values. Others, however, were increasingly swayed by the overwhelming digital evidence and the public's growing outcry. Leaked minutes from one board meeting revealed heated debates. "We have no right to dictate every minor behavior," one dissenting member argued, "and this constant barrage of fines is suffocating the community's spirit." The rift grew wider as more residents shared their support for my cause and recounted similar experiences of intrusive fines and arbitrary restrictions. Meanwhile, I ramped up my digital campaign. I posted detailed blog entries on community forums, complete with video clips from security cameras, screenshots of Karen's resentful messages, and a heartfelt explanation of the rights of property owners. The digital dossier I had assembled became a symbol of resistance, a definitive record of the overreach that now spanned beyond a single incident with my pigs. More and more residents joined the online petition, and the hashtag property rights was trending. Influential local bloggers and social media influencers began to champion the movement, writing op-eds and posts that questioned why one person had been allowed to wield such unchallenged power. Karen's response, or rather her attempts to salvage her reputation, only fueled the anger. In a series of desperate video messages, she attempted to justify her actions, claiming that she was protecting the community and upholding standards. However, every time she spoke, the digital evidence refuted her claims. Her videos were dissected online, with commentators mocking her over-the-top indignation and her inability to recognize that her actions were nothing more than a personal vendetta. By midweek, the pressure on the HOA board became untenable. The board, now bombarded with digital evidence, public petitions, and an outcry from a united community, announced that they would convene a final public hearing to address the incident comprehensively. The announcement was met with widespread relief and celebration from residents who had long been discontent with the arbitrary enforcement of rules. Flyers were distributed, social media events were created, and the community prepared for what was expected to be a historic showdown. On the eve of the hearing, the tension in Crescent Meadows was palpable. I reviewed my evidence one last time with a sense of quiet determination. Every time-stamped clip, every supportive comment, every signature on the petition was a building block for the impending confrontation, a clear message to the HOA board that property rights and creative freedom would no longer be suppressed. On that fateful morning, as the community center filled to capacity with residents, the air buzzed with anticipation. Neighbors wore expressions of hopeful determination, signs that read "Our land, our rights, and no more Karen" were held high, and the entire digital dossier was projected onto large screens for all to see. This was the culmination of months of frustration, resistance, and the unyielding desire for freedom, a moment when every voice in Crescent Meadows would be heard. Every shared clip and every hashtag now served as a testament to the power of collective action in the face of arbitrary governance. The stage was set for a final confrontation that would decide the fate of our community's values, a showdown between the old ways of strict conformity and the new spirit of individual freedom. The decisive moment arrived on a brisk morning as the final public hearing commenced at the Crescent Meadows Community Center. The boardroom was packed with HOA officials, local law enforcement representatives, community leaders, and a resolute assembly of residents, a veritable cross-section of our community united by a common cause. With an unwavering presence, Councilwoman Denise Taylor stepped up to the podium, her eyes alight with determination and the collective hope of every resident who had long felt stifled by arbitrary enforcement. After a thorough review of all the digital evidence, time-stamped security footage, detailed logs of unauthorized trespassing, and countless testimonies from affected residents, we have reached an unassailable conclusion, Councilwoman Taylor began, her voice echoing across the room with authority. It is clear that the actions taken by Mrs. Karen Miller, specifically her decision to ban our neighbor's farm stand and her subsequent invasion of private property to stage an unauthorized event, were driven by personal bias and a flagrant abuse of power. Such actions have no place in Crescent Meadows, where every resident's right to enjoy and utilize their property must be respected. A heavy silence fell as Taylor continued. Effective immediately, all fines and sanctions imposed as a result of these incidents are hereby rescinded. Furthermore, the HOA board will initiate a full disciplinary review of all practices that allowed such overreach to occur. New guidelines will be established to ensure that our community values artistic expression, innovative entrepreneurship, and the fundamental right to private property. Today's decision is not merely about reversing an unjust punishment. It is a resounding declaration that we will no longer tolerate the imposition of personal vendettas on our community. The room erupted in applause as residents nodded in agreement. At that moment, a renowned community advocate known for his tireless defense of individual rights rose to speak. "Today, we stand together as one," he declared, his voice firm and impassioned. "No one should ever be forced to relinquish their rights because of one person's misguided sense of duty. Let this vote be the turning point, a clear message that we, the people of Crescent Meadows, will defend our freedoms and our creative spirit against any form of arbitrary control. We demand accountability, and we will ensure that every violation of our rights is met with swift and decisive action." His words reverberated throughout the room, drawing a thunderous round of applause. Following his address, a senior officer from the local regulatory board presented the final dossier, a meticulously compiled record of all digital evidence, expert analyses, and detailed logs that confirmed the legitimacy of my farm stand operations and debunked every claim made by Karen Miller. The evidence was overwhelming. Every piece of data pointed to one undeniable truth. My right to operate my farm stand was inviolate, and Karen's actions were nothing short of an abuse of power. The Internal Affairs Panel unanimously endorsed strict disciplinary measures against those involved, and the full report was scheduled for immediate public release to ensure total transparency. Councilwoman Taylor concluded, "Let this resolution mark the dawn of a new era for Crescent Meadows, a community where individual rights and creative freedom are paramount, and where our public authorities are accountable to the residents they serve." Our vote today is not just about correcting a single incident. It is a resounding affirmation that we will no longer let arbitrary power dictate our lives. Together, we stand for justice, transparency, and the inalienable right to live and innovate without fear. Her final words, delivered with unwavering conviction, sealed the turning point in our struggle for property rights and creative expression. In that defining moment, as every face in the boardroom shone with determination and hope, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. The overwhelming digital evidence and the unified voice of the community forced the HOA board to enact sweeping reforms, a watershed moment that forever reshaped the governance of Crescent Meadows. The days of punishing creative expression and arbitrarily imposing fines were over, and a future built on respect for individual rights was finally within our grasp. In the weeks following the historic vote, Crescent Meadows underwent a sweeping transformation. The news of the rescinded fines and the extensive reforms adopted by the HOA board spread like wildfire through local media and social networks, igniting impassioned discussions about property rights, artistic freedom, and the critical role of community governance. Editorials in the local newspaper bore inspiring headlines, such as "A New Dawn for Crescent Meadows" and "Community United for Creative Freedom," celebrating the decisive measures taken to protect the freedoms of every homeowner and creative entrepreneur. Hashtags like #PropertyRights, #NoMoreHOA, and #ArtIsFreedom trended widely, reinforcing the community's unwavering determination to stand against arbitrary enforcement. Town hall meetings and community forums saw unprecedented attendance as residents gathered to share their experiences and to envision a future where personal expression and innovative business ventures were not only respected but celebrated. Neighbors who had long lived under the oppressive dictates of the HOA now proudly declared their right to manage their property as they saw fit. Our lands are our legacies, and no one should have the power to dictate how we utilize them, one impassioned resident proclaimed during a bustling meeting. The atmosphere was charged with hope and renewal, a promise that Crescent Meadows would always champion the freedom and individuality of its members. Within the reformed HOA board and local public safety departments, rapid changes were implemented. Senior officials, led by Director James Carter and Lieutenant Marcus Reed, introduced comprehensive training programs that emphasized ethical conduct, cultural sensitivity, and the responsible management of community resources. Regular internal audits and transparent disciplinary procedures were established to ensure that every resident's rights would be scrupulously protected against further arbitrary fines or overreach. Our duty is to safeguard the dignity and freedom of every member of our community, Lieutenant Reed affirmed at a follow-up press conference, underscoring the renewed commitment to justice and accountability. Community leaders and local civil rights organizations also mobilized robustly, organizing workshops, public forums, and educational campaigns that empowered residents and reinforced the importance of creative freedom and individual property rights. When we unite, our voices can dismantle even the most outdated systems, a local activist declared at a town hall meeting, inspiring neighbors to join in the ongoing struggle for equity and freedom. For me, the journey from confrontation to resolution was as deeply personal as it was transformative. My decision to stand up against HOA Karen's draconian fines and to reclaim my property rights by boldly taking over the local grocery store had not only restored my creative and economic freedom, but it also ignited a movement that resonated throughout Crescent Meadows. Neighbors, once timid and silenced by fear of retribution, now shared their own stories of resistance and united under a common banner of change. The digital evidence that captured every moment of this struggle became a potent symbol, a rallying cry for every resident who believed in the inviolability of private property and the inalienable right to self-expression. Karen Miller, once the formidable enforcer of the HOA's stringent rules, was now reduced to a cautionary tale. The digital records of her past transgressions circulated widely, undermining her authority and exposing the dangers of unchecked power. Her influence waned as more and more residents embraced the movement for creative freedom and individual rights, realizing that a community's strength lay in its diversity, not in its uniformity. At a final celebratory gathering in the Central Park of Crescent Meadows, residents, local officials, and community advocates came together under the golden glow of a setting sun. A massive banner reading "Unity, Freedom, and Innovation" was unfurled between majestic oak trees, and heartfelt speeches echoed through the crowd. Today, we celebrate our victory over arbitrary governance, a victory for every homeowner and creative spirit in Crescent Meadows, Councilwoman Carter proclaimed, her voice resounding with pride and determination. The roaring ovation that followed was a powerful affirmation of our collective commitment to uphold our rights and to ensure that no one could ever stifle our creativity with petty fines. As each new day dawned over Crescent Meadows, the legacy of that transformative confrontation endured as a beacon of hope. The story of how HOA Karen Miller's baseless bans on my farm stand were met with a bold counterattack by purchasing the grocery store she frequented became a rallying cry for every resident who believed in the sanctity of private property and the freedom to innovate. Every sunrise carried the promise that in Crescent Meadows, truth, justice, and individual creative expression would forever prevail. In the end, what began as a personal battle evolved into a watershed moment for our entire community. We emerged more united, more vigilant, and more determined than ever to safeguard our rights against any form of bureaucratic overreach. And as the sun rose each morning over our reclaimed neighborhood, it carried with it the promise that Crescent Meadows would always be a place where creativity, ingenuity, and respect for individual property were cherished above all else.